Okay. Looks like we're on YouTube. Well, then let's call the meeting to order. How about that? 6:35. And with that, let's
All right,
take.
Fred, I'm gonna
Oh, here's some
make you
more
the host.
attendee. Here's Bob coming in here. Let me get him over here. Okay.
Joanne, could you help me with this? The audio is not working for some reason.
Oh, we can hear you, Ren.
We can hear you.
Can you hear us?
Maybe he can't
Hello,
hear.
Ren?
Is it that you can't hear people or they can't hear
No,
you?
We can hear you.
Good evening, everybody.
Yes, yeah, I'm
Oh,
off
yeah.
here.
Hi, Bob.
So click it, see what happens.
Now I can't hear Ren.
Wait, he just muted himself.
Okay. Can you hear us, Ren?
Let's see. Put audio settings again.
Let's give him a few minutes to work it out. Ren, can you hear us?
Red's talking, I can't hear it either.
Yeah,
I guess he cannot hear us.
speaker. You cannot hear
now.
the sound. Select a different. Oh, okay. So click. Don't hit stop. Click it against the stop. No, click. Yes, click stop because you want it there. Okay. Now click that. Okay, go to that one.
This one?
This one.
How about now? Got us?
It's good, okay.
Got it. Okay. Everybody's connected. So with that, let's do our roll call. And we will start with Ren.
Here.
Ren is here. And Tess Taylor.
Here.
Tess is here. Mark is excused. Bob Scabelli
Here.
is here. Jonathan Gregory
Here.
is here. Ron.
Here.
Ron is here. Lee. I don't see Lee. Okay. Well then, let's go on to the minutes now. Section 3, the minutes. I think we may have to move this to the next meeting because I could not find the October minutes. Here it says the September 12th minutes, but Ren, maybe I'm not sure. I wasn't able to get the October ones.
Okay,
If you guys are okay with it, maybe we can push that to the January meeting.
yeah, we'll have to, because I can't reach it at the moment, so, yeah.
Okay, so that will be pushed to January. Okay, number 4, public comment. My goodness, we do not have anyone attending this meeting tonight. Isn't that a first? That's too bad that there's no public comment. Well, gosh, this is going to be really fast, right to the point. Section number 5.
But I,
Committee.
Fred, if I can make a point, I never got the agenda. I don't know if I was the only one or everybody.
No, Bob, I'm sorry, Bob. Ren sent it out to everyone, and I believe I saw your name on the list. But Ren sent it out, and I saw a bunch of people on it. I hope that you got it. But I can send it to you right now if that's.
No, that's okay. Well, I'll just follow along, but obviously we can't prepare if we don't have the agenda, so.
Well, let's see. I think it was sent last week. Let me check on last Thursday. It was sent, and I see your name on it, Robert. Oh, I think it's an old address though. That's probably why you didn't get it.
Is it the old GTL?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's gone, of course. I'm not on the
Okay.
board, so
Okay.
Fred, did you send it or did Ren send it?
No, I was out of town
Okay.
last week actually, so I wasn't able to do any administrative work for this meeting.
well,
That's
we're
all right.
going
So
forward,
it's-
guys. Can we fix that? It's just my first initial R, last name @gmail.
Okay.
But Ren, you sent it, right?
Yeah, and evidently I grabbed the wrong address. I probably got the old one and the new one, and I grabbed the old one by accident. So I'm sorry, Bob.
Okay,
We'll get it organized. Thanks for pointing that out. Sorry, Bob. Okay, so number 5, committee member news and announcements. Does anybody have some announcements for us?
Yeah, I have a few quick items, Fred. And I'm just checking. I mean, I looked up the agenda on the website, but Ren, do you recall when you sent it? I'm just wondering if I'm not getting emails too.
When did I send it? Wednesday?
Wednesday.
I see it here, yes, Wednesday and Thursday.
So that would have been the 9th. All right. Am I on that distribution?
You should be.
But am
Yes.
I? Because I'm just not seeing it in my inbox is all.
I
That's
see here, test.taylor@gtlnc.org.
okay.
that
I'll
was-
have to investigate as to why
That
I
was
didn't.
on the 10th, actually, the 10th at 12:56 p.m.
All right. Okay, so if it went out, good. All right, you know what? Now I see it. So thank you. I apologize. Maybe there are slightly too many emails. So
Yeah,
and Fred, the minutes just weren't able to get done this month. Is we'll see them in January, I suppose.
Yes.
Okay, great.
That's correct, yes.
I do want to thank Ron Babini for coming out to our neighborhood cleanup on Saturday. He hauled gobs of trash. Thank you, Ron. And if we're going to discuss the Toluca Lake Post Office, I can save my comments for that time, although I don't think I see it on the agenda. So,
it's under the Gelson project there.
okay, I'll wait for that moment to make my post office announcements. So that's it for me, young Fred. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, young Tess. We like to keep this meeting young. And we'll keep it
Good
young.
night,
with-
then.
Okay, well, okay,
Young and fresh, Fred.
got that right.
Yeah.
We love that. So number 6, old business. 6.1 is the city planning department community plan. And we're having some planning community forums for next year. Ren, I'm going to hand that off to you. Maybe you could shed some light on the community plan.
Yeah, I've got a call in, an email into our planning liaison. Basically, we want to set up some sessions next year, ideally in person. I just think it works much better if you can have an interaction with people rather than having them make a presentation. Then you ask questions. It's the formality of it, I think, slows it down, and people are not interacting the way they need to on this. The big thing that I'm going to push for, and we'll talk about a little more, is the whole notion of increasing the multifamily housing in our community, and the parking problems that brings on. And Fred, you'll talk about the people at Auckland, but I think that's the leading edge of what's coming in our community if we don't get the planners to formally plan for city parking lots through our neighborhoods, because there clearly is not enough parking now. And as they add more people, 2-bedroom units with one parking spot in the building, it's going to be a problem all across the neighborhood. And as we get more density of housing, the ability of people to kind of drive over to the next street where there are not yet, fully built up units is going to end, so that people can't drive around the neighborhood and find a place to park, because everybody will be looking for parking at the same time. So we're gonna have to push our planners to deal with parking. I think also issue of a park. If we're going to get higher density housing, we definitely need more park space. And of course, I pushed early on, I pushed for a top park. I still think that ought to be a possibility someplace where, young families.
Ren, excuse me, you pushed for what exactly? What was that?
Oh, it's a tot park, for small children. It's designed for children under 5 or 6.
A tot park, T-O-T?
Tot,
Yeah, like
T-O-T,
short
yeah.
for toddler.
Okay, got it.
Like
Toddler, I'm sorry. Yeah, anyway, it's for kids. And there's some good examples of that throughout the city. It's not something we're trying to invent. But I think our neighborhood deserves it. We've got, as I say, plenty of multifamily already and more coming. And there needs to be a place for young families to gather. There's still social value to that as well. And I won't go into all that, but, there's a big proponent set of people that are out there pushing for tot parks because they think it has a real value beyond just a place for kids to play. So you'll hear me talk about that when we get to the planners. Anyway, the community plan, I think we're going to really have to deal with it. At our last meeting with the planners, when they sort of casually said, we're not changing the zoning for a lot of Toluca Lake, as if that means everything's going to stay the same. No, the zoning that we have now is going to allow a much different set of projects than it used to. So we have to really get familiar with what the current zoning will allow, and then make sure that we push where it's just not realistic. Any other questions, comments?
Well, go ahead, Jonathan.
Rain, since you were talking about the parking, this afternoon, I came across a list of the laws that are going into effect in 2023. So it's not a list of laws that are proposed. Among them is one called AB 2097. And I'll just tell you in a sentence what it means is, and I don't even understand the language, but it says, prohibits public agencies from imposing minimum parking requirements within a half a mile of public transit. So if that's a law that's going into effect, clearly a big chunk of Toluca Lake is within a half a mile of public transit. I don't know what they mean by a public agency, but there's a whole list of laws. If you read that through that I sent you, they're all for density, increasing density, reducing parking, making just everything toward density and development and parking. Everything is all about that. So.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I went through that list real quickly and that jumped out at me. It's just clearly at the state level, they are allowing the developers to do whatever they want. And somehow we're going to have to try and deal with it locally. I don't know how at this point, but it could get real ugly if a developer shows up and wants to build, 50 units with no parking. It's just we have rapid transit. I mean, obviously we're fairly close to transit. It's just that the transit we have doesn't lead to where people are working. So we'll have people living in the community. We won't have many people who jump on the subway to go downtown to their job downtown, because most of the people in Toluca Lake don't work downtown. So it's not like they don't need a car because they go back and forth to work on the subway. No, everybody needs a car in Toluca Lake. So, we're in a rock and a hard place, I'm afraid.
So Ren, am I to understand that you now disfavor density? That is nice, but a little bit late.
Don't mischaracterize. I've never been a big proponent of density. I think there's a certain level of what has to be allowed based on our zoning. And what we've tried to do in the past is get concessions from developers to build better buildings, recognizing the needs in the community. We can't go and say, no, we have no, veto power over development. We can only hopefully get some modification and some realistic developments.
Well, I mean, I take a stronger stand than that, Ren, as you know, but regarding the AB 2097 that you just mentioned, Jonathan, that is Laura Friedman, the bill that was passed, and it's totally elitist. It bans local governments from requiring parking spaces in any residential or commercial project that's within half a mile from public transit. This is the great TOC projects. And even if the transit is just the intersection of two major bus routes that run every 15 minutes during commuter hours, that's regarded as transit-oriented community, as we've seen with the furor over what's happening in our own neighborhood with the post office. So I know that I was asked and was planning to present an analysis of what some of this legislation means for us, and I started to put it together, but I don't have it ready to present tonight because it's more, it's complex, but the ultimate analysis is that it's going to be a big fat mess because parking is going to be a problem, and all of this is coming down from the state. I do have a very interesting New York Times article and a rebuttal by an author, a rebuttal of the author to share with you, which I'll email everybody after the meeting tonight, which debunks a lot of this fraudulent this fraudulent language that's been foisted upon us about a housing crisis. It's just not true. We have literally close to, if not over 100,000 rentals available now in Los Angeles. And this is all about money. It's never been about anything else. And the fact is that developers wanted to take the power away from local communities to push back against development in their communities. So they took it up to the state level. And I believe that this article, the rebuttal of this article that I will send you, really frames it well and puts the lie to so many of these things that we've been hearing and have accepted as fact. And I will say furthermore that a lot of the press, the LA Times, the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, deliberately distort these housing issues and have not been useful in getting correct and true information across. So I believe that these mainstream newspapers have proven to be unreliable, certainly with respect to these real estate issues. And in fact, I think really what they do is promote the urban growth machine because they're in the business of keeping the real estate bubble inflated. Anyway, that's my thoughts. And somebody's not muted. Is that you, Ron?
Yeah, that was me. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Anyway, those are my thoughts on density and parking, which is going to be a huge, huge problem, as if it wasn't bad enough already. So that's it for me on that for now.
Can I just make one comment? I had my hand up, but. Hello?
I'm not stopping you,
Go ahead,
Bob. Go
Bob.
ahead.
Okay. This is one area where Tess and I disagree, and no need to rehash everything that Tess said, except for one word. And this is in reference to 209 said, it doesn't ban parking, it just reduces the mandates that is currently in our building code. Just to recap it, currently the city requires one parking space per bedroom for any development. It's a minimum. A developer can add more, they don't, but a developer can add more. So that's the minimum. TOC was a Los Angeles measure, 2016, the voters voted for it, which cut that in half when you would buy a transit hub. In other words, the developer could have a minimum of 1/2 parking space per bedroom. What Sacramento just did was superseded TOC and said, no, in fact, if you're in a transit hub, the mandate is 0. Now, is that going to, I don't know how that's going to affect developers, frankly, because if I'm going to do a building, I would think twice about no parking. I think that would affect the saleability of the building. very much. And if he didn't feel that way, the banks certainly might think that it's a risky investment. So it's worth looking at. You're right. It increases the parking, increases density and reduces a mandate for parking where you have a clear transit hub. And we all know LA doesn't really have a transit system. And they're ahead of the game from my point of view, because you're restricting parking, but there really isn't any viable alternatives in my mind. So that's what's happening with Sacramento. And they'll tell you that the reason they're jumping in and looking for density and less parking is because the communities are not doing anything about housing. So that comes back to Tessa's point. Is there a crisis or isn't there a crisis? And if there is a crisis, that's why Sacramento is acting. And if there's no crisis, then they should step aside and get out of the way. That's all I have.
Very good. I like those comments. Step aside and get out of the way.
Well, there's only three things
Like
you can
that.
do, Fred. You can lead, follow, or get out of the way. So
I like that too. If it's the right thing, then very good.
but we're stuck with it. I mean, and as far as the development, the most powerful weapon city planning has is zoning. So as soon as they change zoning, then you can see major changes. In fact, SB 9, which was passed last year, Governor Newsom signed that 2097, by the way. So that's law now. It takes effect in 2023. But SB 9 eliminated single family zoning. That was major. It's probably a bigger impact than the parking.
I mean, we don't have to get into this now, but if Sacramento overrides local zoning, what's the point of the local zoning making rules if the state says, you know,
Well, the state
doesn't matter
supersedes.
anymore?
And that was the issue. I definitely don't want to go back to it, but that was the issue with Bloomfield. State allowed them to, in return for that 11-foot height, the state allowed them increased density in the form and affordable housing. 10% of the units had to be affordable housing. That was state mandated. So yeah, you do have less and less control by intentionally. That's what they're doing. They're taking away local control because their argument is because local is not doing anything.
Well,
In
listen,
fact,
there's no obligation for a community that is full to put more housing in. People can build out. They don't have to build in. Colby, do you want 4 more houses on your home parcel? Jonathan, do you? Bob, do you? Fred, do you?
No, I don't.
No.
I'm just reciting. I'm reciting law test. That's all.
Well, but we're the ones who helped to shape the law. And, I'm a little bit late to the party, unfortunately. I only got involved in this a couple of years ago, but this is unfortunately a trend that's been happening. As corporate developers have grown in size and in influence, they dislike having to deal with lots of local governments with a variety of regulations. So they decided they'd prefer to deal with state governments because they can focus their resources. And frankly, it's easier to, buy favor and buy legislators. And that's really what's happened. We have people with conflicts of interest running our state legislature. And it's as simple as that. So, we don't need to belabor this point, but I feel very strongly about this. I don't want to see quality of life eroded because of somebody's greed who wants to thrust more density into communities that are full. Why do they have to come to, any one of the full zip codes? There's plenty of space in Fontana, in Riverside, in Lancaster. People can build out. There's hundreds of square miles of open land throughout California. It doesn't all have to be in Los Angeles. So those are my thoughts.
All right, Jonathan, go ahead.
Just add in here now, because we're talking about legislation. There's nothing that speaks to the flavor of Los Angeles politics right now more than the most recent election. So I sent Ren and Fred the 3 ballots that were directly toward housing. So the first would be LH, and that was authorization for more low-income housing by the city, making the city, so to speak, the landlord. That's passing on Friday afternoon. That was passing at about 70%. Mind you, I think it was only 28% of all eligible voters voted in Los Angeles on this past election. So very few people are voting. And they're mostly voting very, let's say, toward their firm belief that we lack housing. So that's reflective of it. I don't know if that has been called, but so far it's a yes, approving the measure for more low-income housing is en route to pass. The next one is called SP, which was very deceptive. I researched that a little bit and found out they're calling it for the parks. And it actually, the majority of the money would have been spent on the Olympics. And the way what the city council did years ago was they took away money from the parks and started charging the parks an expense for their water and their public services, which they do to no other entity in the city. So that makes the parks look underfunded and in poor condition. And then they put this on the ballot so that taxpayers will pay more money, agree to pay more money. Well, it looks to be failing. The taxpayers are saying no. And then the last one was Measure ULA. And this was funding, it's just amazing. They're funding affordable housing and tenant assistance programs through a tax on real property transfers. This seems to be passing. In my recollection, it was a $5,000 transfer tax on any property. I forget the threshold. It was a few $1,000,000, but they marketed it as if it was for mansions. But clearly, the first thing you should think of a multi-million-dollar property is a commercial property. So it's going to increase the cost of transacting commercial properties, which makes business more expensive in LA, and LA a less favorable place to conduct your business. So there's just so many things. There's the other ordinance, the other law going on. It's failing also, where it was $80-some per 1,000 feet of single family homes. I think that was the park one. And that was the one that's failing, okay? It's just the march, as Ren said months and months ago, it was just rings in my head. The bus has left the station. The government is, they're still forcing private hotel owners to report to city council what their empty room counts, so that our city, it's not a funded program right now, can tell these property owners, private property owners, who's going to be staying in their property. It's just an astounding situation that's going on in Los Angeles, and it's unlike the rest of the state of California.
It's crazy, and it's absolutely crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, private property isn't private anymore. How did that happen?
Well, the city is dysfunctional, as we found out in the last 4 or 5 years in dealing with the city. Right now, it's completely dysfunctional, and then the city council is on the same level. So we have to deal with it. It's our city. Jonathan has railed against all the trash on Caltrans property, these dilapidated fences that are rusted, not even effective because they often don't even, extend around the property.
No, and Bob, this weekend
It's
at
horrible.
a
It looks disgusting. It makes the city, the neighborhood just look run down and decrepit. So
yeah, at a cleanup on Saturday, Bob, we had a Caltrans fence breached in 4 places, and two of the gate locks were broken. I mean, why even bother fencing?
well, it's even worse than that, because I'm thinking of the entrance to the 101. If you come off Vineland, they have a 15-foot fence, and then the rest of it is completely open. And that's not unusual. And you see, I think Foreman is another example. You got about a 15-foot fence, and the rest of it is all open. And so they clearly don't care. They don't care. It's all broken down, bent, well, at least you could put a nice fence in there. The Garland Hotel put in their own fence. They put in this black wrought iron fence you may have seen. Homeless people were going, on Caltrans property right next to their hotel. So they had to put in their own beautiful fence. It really looks nice. And there's no reason why the state of California, with all the taxes that it collects, can't have more pride in its self.
I agree, Bob.
Colby, you had your hand up.
All right,
Oh,
cool.
yeah, I just wanted to just add a little bit to what Jonathan was saying earlier and discussion on SB9 and SB10, which I followed. And it's $5 million, $5 million threshold, Jonathan, or everyone else, for that transfer fee, which can come up pretty quickly. I know it seems like a lot of money, and it's not a mansion that could be $5 million. It could be a basic piece of vacant land. And then back to SB 9 and SB 10, there is, not that it helps a lot, but in SB 10 does leave the decision up to the local zoning to be implemented. If a property, and actually can't be residential, or what's left of residential and right now, is within a half mile of a transit facility, of course a subway or a major bus stop, that property could, if local zoning approves, be modified to then be built upon, basically apartment buildings. I believe it's 8 units, or maybe it's more. But what could be done is someone could take SB 9, which allows property, let's say if it's a half acre, to be cut in half or subdivided into 2 quarter-acre lots. And then from there, SB 10, if it's allowed locally, which communities now can do so after it's been signed last September, each quarter-acre lot, or even smaller, could house up to 8 units, I believe, each. So that would make a total of 16 units on a previously R1 property. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more on that. But again, that SB 10, which is a larger burden, I believe, to our communities, would only be enacted if local zoning approved it. And also it has to be, again, within a half mile of a major transit facility. That's all.
But SB 9, Colby, is,
No, it's SB 10.
yeah,
That's
10
SB
you're talking about, I know, but 9,
I'm talking about both, a little bit of both, but SB 10.
I don't think
is
you
what-
need zoning approval for SB 9, and I see it happening already. There's a,
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about SB 9. You don't need zoning approval, but
Right.
SB 10 you do.
right. I just wanted to make it clear because we're getting a lot of, not we, I have an architect friend, Bill, who was on the committee, and they're getting a lot of ADU requests. So people are putting
Oh,
in
yeah, yeah.
ADUs, which is what SB 9, directly addressed.
Well, it could be more now. Essentially, you could have, with the way ADU law, you could have a primary home, then you could have the ADU, and then the junior ADU. But now it can be even more because you can take that one lot under SB 9, as you know, and cut it in half.
Yeah,
And
but it has to be a
threshold-
large lot, Kobe.
And well, not really. No, it can be, I think 3,000. I think the lot has to end up right around 4,000 square feet. So you can keep subdividing until that happens. It's pretty amazing.
Colby, can I ask a quick question? And then Tess has her hand up. It doesn't make sense to me that a city would approve a 10, I thought it was 10 units, 4-story building on SB 10. So I'm confused about that because if the law in Sacramento says it is, but then you're saying that no, the city has to approve it first with the local zoning. I can't imagine any zoning putting that through.
Well, they might within a half mile of a transit facility. They might, just like they put through, the TOCs.
Well, that's a lot different from turning a single family building into a 10-unit apartment building.
I know, but I'm just telling you what the law does. It leaves it now up to the local jurisdictions.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right. Well, thanks for shedding that light.
And just to
It's
clarify,
pretty
TOC was an LA ordinance. It had nothing to do with the rest of the state. Now, 2097 just blows TOC out of the water, and now we're stuck with that one, which is worse.
So, and to summarize, Fred, it's horrifying, okay? And let's add to that what is never contemplated in these bills and by the developers is who's going to upgrade the infrastructure. Just because you have increased the density by a factor of 4 to 10 or more, you're not necessarily getting more police officers, more water. We're in the middle of a drought. You're not getting better sewage or upgraded sewage. You're getting far more people using the same infrastructure that is already overburdened and archaic. We have pipes that are ready to burst. What happens when we have a major sewer problem? Road and traffic. Traffic is already insane. When we have 5 to 10 times many more people in the same area, can you imagine what that's going to be like? Who has contemplated this? This is not any kind of quality of life that anyone would wish upon himself or anyone else, unless you were a developer. So it's horrifying, Fred.
Well, I would just add that the developers pay a tremendous amount of impact fees test whenever they build something.
I don't think
I mean,
so,
you can talk
Bob.
$100,000, $100,000 for a permit just to do a large structure. I'm on the corner of Ledge and Riverside. There's a 4-story structure going up, as you well know, with 12 units.
Mhm.
So I am familiar. I mean, I just looked it up. I don't know why. I have nothing else to do, to be honest. But I looked it up, and the impact fees are very high. So to account for exactly what you're saying, the added
Okay,
weight
if
of
that-
that. But let me just finish the point. But we're not seeing huge population increases, so there's not a burden on schools, parks, water, sewer, because it's the same amount of people that live here. They just don't have a place to live. Now, you and I disagree on that, but the issue is housing. It's not going to put any kind of additional stress on the existing system.
Well, yeah, we do disagree. And as far as those impact fees, I'd like to actually see them directed to sewage. So,
Well, that's the city,
yeah.
who knows what goes on then, so.
right. Well, and I'm looking at a lot of these things, Bob, but infrastructure really does concern me. So anyway, we'll leave it at that for now.
Pastor, I'm a civil engineer. I've been railing, the infrastructure in this country has been deteriorating for the last half century.
Oh, sure.
Finally, we got a bill passed with the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which includes infrastructure. It's been going on for 50 years. We never do anything until a building falls down, a bridge falls down, a pipe bursts, a natural gas pipe bursts. Then we do something about it. The people who built all that stuff, they were very special people. They built the Empire State Building in a year. It takes 2 years to build a single-family house here in LA. They built the Hoover Dam. It's an incredible piece of engineering. Those transatlantic railroads, they thought big, they built big, and we can't even maintain what we have. So it says something about us as a people. And I'm just happy we're addressing maintenance and building up our infrastructure.
Yeah, there were some great triumphs in the past, and I wish those standards were now what they were then. And yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of maintenance. So
in the meantime, though, these are laws we have to deal with, and they've been signed by the governor. And so let's just keep tracking them and
exactly.
And then get active with our state representatives. Azarian is active, and Hertzberg. I don't know what happened. Did anybody know what happened with Hertzberg? I know he was running for a different office, wasn't he?
He's running for supervisor in
what happened?
another district.
He lost.
He lost? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he's still our senator or not. Has he moved on? Or?
Well, for a few more weeks.
Well, yeah, that sounds like that doesn't sound like job security, but okay.
He's termed out, Bob.
He's termed out, is he? Okay.
I don't know, but it seems to me one other point I had listening to you guys talk is, Tess has said this many times. I agree with her that a lot of this is about money, and think about the new property tax revenues that will come with all these new developments. I mean, that's, in one parcel, that could be a difference of, 10, 20, 30, $40,000 a year, times how many buildings. So what about that extra money? Where is that being spent? And shouldn't some of that go to some of this infrastructure, which I think the property tax increased revenue would be a lot more than these fees that you would get when you file your permit. So that's something I think that
the property tax goes to the county. So that's who collects it. And I think, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole here, that the Howard Jarvis proposition, the proposition that froze property taxes, I think that was at the time viewed as a triumph, and in some ways it was, and in some ways it wasn't, because to have frozen that is what in large part, I believe, caused the state this workaround to figure out other ways to get that revenue that it might otherwise have gotten. So, but it was a hard-won battle to try to enable elderly people, especially on fixed incomes, not to be priced out of their homes with rising property taxes. But I think in part, this is what we're seeing. In part, what we're seeing as a result of that is that those frozen revenues have caused the state to find workarounds. So,
Well, it's a very interesting conversation. We could probably talk about this all night long, but in the
Correct.
interest of time, why don't we move into 6.2? That is, if no one else has any more comments on this. Doesn't look like.
Yeah, the Gelston project, Tess, you want to tell us, you have some latest on it?
Yeah, tell us about
well-
the post office.
Post office, yeah.
yeah, so actually, I was going to ask if there are any further updates on the post office. You sent an email, I think, last week. I'm actually meeting with Congressman Tony Cardenas's district director, Brian Gavidia, tomorrow, as well as one of his, I think his legislative rep here. The district director and the deputy district director. And one of the things we're going to be discussing is the post office, because as you recall, Ren, you assigned me to try to figure out what was going on. And I contacted Congressman Sherman's office no fewer than 10 times, including the Washington office. And I was able to get hold of John Alford, I think, once, but never got much of a response. All I wanted to know is how can we get in touch with the postal inspector for our region to find out what's going on. But Ron, you mentioned when I saw you on Saturday, the state of the post office is they're trying to shut down retail locations to save money. So I hope to find out more about that tomorrow and get the help of the district director, because they're our interface with federal agencies when federal agencies are non-responsive, like the post office. Ron, what were you mentioning this weekend about the post office?
What I mentioned was that I talked to John Mullen, and I think Ren may have been at that meeting along with Steve Hampar with the developers. And what I got was, and this is long before the lockdowns, when you got a few concessions from the developers on that property, one of the things they said is that they would be glad to give a, if you will, quote, first refusal to the post office to locate there when the building was completed. That was my understanding. Is that?
And that was pre-COVID, Ron. That was pre-COVID?
Oh, yeah, that was a long time.
The Burbank boys. Okay.
Is that correct, Ren?
Yeah, that was my understanding, and they were open to having the post office stay there. And that was what started our conversation of trying to reach the congressman to get the post office to agree to stay there. And, we got no response back. And I kind of read that as saying they'd already decided not to do it, that a bigger policy was to get rid of local post office and consolidate into the regional post offices. And, but, and I that's one of the reasons I asked Tess to try, because maybe she would, be more dogged than I was at getting to the congressperson. But yeah, she was more dogged, but she didn't get any further than I did. So I was sort of surprised and happy to see that they put the post office out in temporary spot out in the back. And then when I heard that they're coming back, I mean, one of the post office staff people told my neighbor, yeah, they're coming back. And it would have been politically smart for the congressperson to have let us know that.
Well, and
he could have come out and taken a bow.
But wait a minute, Ren, hold on. Ren, that's just hearsay.
Yeah, of course.
That's double hearsay, if you will. And what does that clerk really know about what the hell the post office is going to do? Not his local, but the people who are going to decide whether they have a retail post office in Toluca Lake.
And And why can't somebody from the post office communicate with us? This is what I find infuriating.
I spoke with two clerks, and they both said that they're moving back into that property when it's done, and their lease goes through 2026.
Okay,
That's
So-
terrific.
Yeah, if that's true, that's terrific.
Yeah.
And that was
I go
when-
there once a week, and I talk to them, and they assure me that's what's happening. So
And
I
that
know
was-
it's employees.
that was just within the last week or two, Colby?
Yes, I've
Okay.
had 2 conversations about 2 weeks ago, and then
Okay.
probably a month and a half ago, and they said they're moving back in because the lease goes out through 2026, and part of their lease agreement is for Burbank Boys to have this temporary facility and then to move them back in. It sounds like the Burbank Boys have to put them back again into the development.
Okay, well, maybe it'll be a short meeting tomorrow.
I know. Well, it's so funny how we've all reached, and I did it even a long time ago, and Tess, and everyone's worked so hard. And you're right, Tess. I mean, if someone had just the congressman's office or someone said, hey, they could have taken credit for this and done a great job. It just happened. It seemed to happen by itself.
Yeah.
Oh, brother. Okay. Unbelievable.
You're not used to it yet, Tess.
Not used to what?
All
Yeah.
this nonsense at the city and the state.
I don't accept it, Bob.
No, I didn't ask you to accept it. I mean, but you should be a little jaded. After all, we went through trying to get that intersection fixed.
Yeah. Moving on to 6.3 state legislative agenda. I think we've talked about that pretty much. Is there something that any of us at this point want to sort of get on the agenda to push for next year? In other words, are there some things we want our local representatives to do that's new, that isn't just, hey, stop the craziness, but are there some specific things that
Yeah, I do, Ren, and it's addressed in part with item 6.4 is I'd like to make sure that the California State Auditor's report on RENA, and it's RHNA, there's a typo in the agenda, is taken seriously, and we look at that because these RENA numbers are inflated, and the RENA, which stands for Regional Housing Needs Allocation, is what has been dictated to our various communities, the numbers of housing units that need to be placed in each community. And it is so bad, in fact, that if we do not build according to these numbers that are dictated to us, we will be penalized. In fact, I believe something along those lines is happening in or around Burbank with the Pickwick bowling alley I just learned about a week or two ago. Do you know what's going on over there, Ren? No.
No.
Anyway, I'll have more news at our next meeting, but the Pickwick bowling alley is being taken down and a housing development is being put up. And I don't want to speak further on it without researching it, but just to repeat generally what I was told is one of these new laws is being asserted where new developments are being put in because this community hasn't met its RENA numbers. But anyway, I will have details on that at the next meeting. I only just learned about it. So that would be my request, Ren, is to have the California State Auditor's report for, to the extent that we can have our local legislators make that a priority to really make sure that these RENA numbers are accurate, because it appears that they've been inflated, and that's going to have a very real effect on us. That would be my request. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good one. 6.5, the clock is actually moving forward. They had a final meeting with the the city staff, and one of the one of the higher level guys stepped in and basically cut the red tape and said, "Go ahead." So they're in a position now where they can go ahead and finally install the clock. So we'll be hearing more of that probably right after the first of the year. Moving on to 6.6 developer guidelines. Still don't have a volunteer to that back up again. Maybe next spring we'll come back to that and see if we can get some people who are get some people who are interested in running for the neighborhood council to kind of pick that up as an issue.
Can you do it, Ren?
I'm just too busy at this point. I mean, maybe in the spring. I mean, I'll see what's happening in the spring. I've got a couple of projects that I'm trying to finish up this year, but I don't have time now to. Part of the problem with me is that I have a pretty good idea of what I think it needs to look like, and that would take a little bit of work on my part to research some elements, more broadly that I'm, feel strongly about, and see how it applies in Toluca Lake, because I haven't really kind of put the two together at this point. It'll take me a while, and I've got a couple of other writing assignments that I have ahead of it. So anyway, it's sitting out there.
Well, I would do it, but I'm maxed out. So if there are no other volunteers, I guess we'll have to wait until next year.
Yeah. Okay, moving on, 7.1. Jonathan, you're up.
You're
Were you-
muted, Jim.
Fred, were you able to get those photographs and put them on the
Yes.
screen?
Want me to put them on the screen?
Yeah. Are you going to do them one by one, or are you going to put them all together? How does it work?
One by one, and you can just tell me to go forward.
Okay, because there'll be one or at least one that I'm just going to skip altogether. Before we get started, it won't be very long at all. I just want to say a few things. As far as this proposal goes, this is unlike other proposals that I've seen at the neighborhood council, in that proposals should be very, very exact. They should define exactly what you're after and take control of the result. In this case, that's not what I'm aiming for. Rather, there's beautification partners and there's CD2 who are involved, and this is an issue of trust. So as you see, what I propose is not defining the sign. It's not defining anything but the priority for the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council to have such an outcome considered in the monies that beautification partners will be spending to improve the community. So with that said, understanding my goal is not control, bottom line control, but involves trust that beautification partners in CD2 will do a good job, because it's in nobody's benefit that anything that comes out of this looks lousy. Okay. Before also, I want to mention, at the bottom of the agenda is the next meeting, and it says, I think, December. I'm not looking at it right now, so make sure we talk about if we're not meeting again until January.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah, there's definitely no meeting in December.
Okay.
And it's, the January meeting will be the next meeting.
Okay.
Jonathan, one question clarification. This is going to be purely city, nothing Caltrans or state signage, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
There's no Caltrans land involved. Okay.
Okay.
You'll need Caltrans cooperation, however, if you're beyond
that's right.
real estate. So you'll have to include them as part of the picture at some point.
That's right, because there's fencing involved that they're supposed to be replacing. Remember, we heard, just as background, what we do know, or what we have heard, we don't know it, we've heard it from, what's his name?
Steve Ferguson?
Steve Ferguson, that the fencing that runs from Vineland all the way up follows along Riverside Drive, up toward like where Hortense and Riverside come together. All of that fencing is supposed to be replaced by iron fencing that's either 10 feet or 12 feet high. Right now, I think it's 8 feet high.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's so dilapidated. Good.
Really, it's a mess. Okay, so with that said, what I'd like to do first is read the motion and give you a feeling for what it is that I'm after. The purpose of this little thing is to get your buy-in to it and then move it to the general meeting. So I'll read it, we'll look at the pictures, and I'll tell you what I think you should be looking at in each of the pictures. So I'll read it first. Okay, Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council requests that CD2 and beautification partners prioritize into their planned use of the allocated $2 million to improve the community the following: 2 community signs in Greater Toluca Lake, each of which shall have 30 to 50% dedicated to Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council branding, and the balance to the name of the community in which it's located. 1 shall be placed at the northwest corner of Riverside and Vineland intersection on the quote strip. Most people know what that means, but we're going to look at a picture of it at the strip of city land within West Toluca Lake. This is a problematic strip of land that's always got schmutz on it. So I had to look hard to find a picture of it without the schmutz because I didn't want to put it on here, okay? Second sign shall be located as instructed by Plum Committee within 60 days or after 60 days shall be at the site determined by beautification partners and CD2. Project is submitted for acceptance by beautification partners and CD2 to be financially supported within the $2 million provided to beautification partners community improvement project. Okay, so now we can look at the pictures. So as you can see,
Jonathan, was that motion, I didn't see anything in the meeting documents. Was that provided to us?
No, a motion doesn't have to be a document. It has to be on the agenda, the subject.
Okay.
But they didn't do anything wrong by not having the motion. I did supply it, but they didn't. And
I'd love to see it, please. If I could look at it more carefully, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Right. I'll read it again at the end too. And I think it's always a good idea to have it in writing. In any case, if you look at this sign now, Fred, are you able to flip through it and show us the location at northwest corner first? Let's start there. Stop. There,
Yeah.
stop. Okay. So for everybody, that's the intersection. So on the right is Vineland and on the left is Riverside Drive. Okay. That strip of land, see the chain link fence in front of the trees?
Yeah.
That space from that chain link fence to the sidewalk is the strip that is clearly city owned. This is what the argument you heard about in the past, where no one would take ownership for it. And presently there's always schmutz there. It's a disaster. So I went back in time to find that picture. Okay, if you go back one picture, you'll get it from the other side. This is probably the most trafficked area in all of Greater Toluca Lake, that Vineland up to the metro from Ventura Boulevard. That is a corridor that probably has more traffic and is one of the best points of visibility for any community sign just based on its traffic. Okay, you can go, whatever works for you to cover all these signs. I just want to say something about each type. So what's unique about this sign is it's a pure box, okay? It's simply a box. Next. Okay, what's unique about this sign is you've got the gravity of the sign on one side, and on the left side, remember, if there were to be a fence, the fence would come up to the right side, and on the left side, the fence would be coming into the sign and then at the bottom. But what this does is it shows you the use of more expensive materials on the right and on the bottom, which is a stone. It's really not stone, but that, I forget how they call that. It's a facade stone on top of cheaper materials. And the bulk of the sign is an inexpensive wood or it could be made out of anything. Okay, next.
Would have to be vandal proof.
Right. That's a reversal, so you can see it going from the right or from the left. Next. Okay, what's interesting about this sign is if it was in between the, how do you call it, the iron fencing, you can see how when you use a different material, it's got a different look and might blend. A lot of people like this look because it's rustic and has a modern look to it using old industrial rusted look things. So you can see how they've got the name of the community, and then on the bottom, they're dedicating part of the space to a different subject, meaning the community, a larger community it's located in. Next. Okay, what's unique about this is what they call modulation. So you can go use a cheaper material in the back and then use more expensive. It's not prohibitively expensive, this facade stone. It's not real, but it looks attractive. Next. Okay, this is a standard sign that you see in a lot of communities where you've got the gravity on both sides. A fence would come up to each end of that. And there's nothing creative about it, but it can be curved to match the contour of the corner, but it doesn't need to be, it would be set at an angle, and it's clearly visible to the whole, all four streets of that intersection. Next. Okay, this shows you how you can build up to it from a corner. So you don't have to do all this expensive stuff in the front with the stones, but what it is it's conceptual to show by planting in front of it, you reduce the likelihood of vandalism toward it, because people, depending, like if you plant low bougainvilleas and stuff, they can't get near it because they got prickers. Next. Very standard sign, once again, using more expensive materials and cheaper wood. Next. There you can see the fence. It's very standard signs. They're very classic and they're easy to read. In the case of Vineland Riverside, you could see west would go up at the very top in the curved area. Toluca Lake would go where on the first line you see there. So it'd say West Toluca Lake, and the bottom could say Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council, maybe skewed off to one side or to either side or centered. Either way, it kind of gives you a real simplistic, and simple is good in terms of signs, what can be done, and it adds a lot of sophistication. Next. Again, a very easy standard sign. Next. Next. And you can see the planting in front of it. The planting matters because it keeps people away. This is one of the better signs for cutting costs because you don't have to have the concrete, the stacked concrete on each side of it, but it gives you the illusion of putting a sign on a fence. I don't like it as much without the gravity of the stonework on each end, but especially in that Vineland Riverside area, it really is the space to add some prestige to the community. By doing you've got the space, and we don't have that kind of space in the rest of the community. But as I said earlier, I think that the Plum Committee should identify, I didn't do it, and I don't think we have to, we can default it to beautification partners, but I do think it's important to have two signs as opposed to one sign, because this is not a West Toluca Lake project. That would be a misnomer. It is not a monument project either. It's called community sign. That's the terminology in all of the research I did on these things. And the reason they put these signs is because they add value to a community. So these type of signs actually drive up the cost of property because not a lot of communities do nice things. And if there's $2 million in this account, I'm sure beautification partners and CD2 have their ideas as what they wish to do with it. But a sign of this nature, my own instinct on what construction costs are, is a sign of this nature. We're talking about, it could be done for $10,000. It's simply not a lot of money because as you can see by looking at it, you're talking about nothing but two pylons covered, two cinder block, I don't know the word, cinder block columns as gravities on each of the left and right side. The fencing is going to go in anyways. So we're not talking about extraordinary prices. You don't necessarily need the bottom foundation across. That's an option. Of course, it makes it a little more expensive and a little more attractive, but it's all up for grabs as to how much you want to spend on something. But they're not expensive. They're simply concentrations of artistic creativity that add a lot of value to a community. So once again, I ask you to take it. You don't need to flip back in the picture of the location, but if you can, Fred, if you can find that location, it'd be a good time to go back to it again. That location picture. That one. Now, if you can, now that you've seen some of these signs, imagine a 10 or 12 foot iron fence running from the freeway around that corner and all the way up Vineland, Riverside, which is what they're telling us they're planning, and a good quality sign right there. We're lucky to have those trees there. And that would do two things. As I already said, it would add value to the community by having a prestige sign. And number two, it would take that of the availability factor of that land out of the hands. I'm just going to call it schmutz, call it whatever you want. That's always occupying it right now. So that's the proposal. Once again, as I said, it's not a proposal to identify the exact sign. It's leaving it in the hands of those people who probably can do better than us, beautification partners. As I said, I think that the work they've done in the past, I've never seen them do anything horrible. I'm not talking about finances. I'm talking about the artistry of what they've got planned, including the clock. It's a great idea. In this case, I think we can work as a trusting group of people with beautification partners and CD2. We don't have to do anything but what I've provided for in this motion to identify that there are two signs, what we want these signs to do, where we would like them placed. And I think that's in that we want them paid for from the money of that within that $2 million, that these are priorities for our community. So that's the proposal. So from you, I would be asking to agree to it and send it to the general meeting. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jonathan. That was a nice presentation. And only thing I would have to say to that is I would tend to be on the side to spend more money on something like this. And even if the community had a fundraiser and people match that, I think some of the examples you showed us, are very nice, but may not last in what I had in my head, which could be a block of travertine stone with bronze letters on them, something that would last centuries. Big, again, I don't want to use the word monument, but I like the idea. I would think we should build something strong and big and durable materials that'll never wear down.
I agree with you, and I'm just hesitant to say how much it deserves, how much of an impact it has on a community. We're very, very lucky. I've got a career in marketing for Gucci in Europe. And when you recognize an opportunity and you go for it, that's branding and marketing, and packaging is everything. If anyone should know that, that's an American, because at Gucci, I'll just tell you, we used to do great packaging and we could sell gold-plated anything for fortunes. Whereas in Europe, they won't buy it. They want it gold. So in America, packaging is everything. And we ought to invest in the packaging of it. I agree with you, Fred, that putting a good, we're not talking about $100,000, but a good chunk of money might even be $50,000. It would be well worth it in that location.
So too.
But there are going to be people who are hesitant because it's West Toluca Lake. I've seen what the flavor is like at the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council. There are people who always wanted to jettison it off because, yeah, the problems are down there in West Toluca Lake, but it isn't because it's West Toluca Lake, it's because of the freeway system generally, the convergence of three different entities of property. But adding we simply don't have a spot of land like that, where we got the space and the traffic in front of it. It's magic that it's even there and still open.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And, you know, I won't take too much more time, let all the rest of you speak, but, you know, West Toluca Lake is somewhat of a new thing. I mean, you know, when I was growing up here as a little kid, that was always referred to as North Hollywood. And West Toluca Lake, I think, kind of came on when the neighborhood council started, when he took over the year 2000, late 90s. And then the same thing with Toluca Terrace was zoned. Even Toluca Woods had signage. None of that had signage before then. And I actually think that that's a really good thing for the community, and to expand Toluca Lake's borders and to recognize West Toluca Lake along with the others. So I think it would absolutely benefit the community. I only say this because of your comment of people kind of resisting that, and maybe so in the past, but I don't think so anymore. I actually think that it's a benefit to the neighborhood as a whole, and to brand West Toluca Lake as such is good for everybody. But it
Yeah,
hasn't been like that.
Yeah, the little neighborhood signs came out of the GTLNC budget early on. So, and we had a whole discussion about what to call the area, the northernmost part of Toluca Lake. Toluca, hell, I won't go into all of that, but it was fun. But the thing I like about this site is the trees. I mean, I think you're right, Jonathan. It begs some signage in front of it and some real drama there, because those trees are I mean, you couldn't buy those trees and put them in there. They're, you know, you've got an asset there that could be utilized and taken advantage of. And you're right about all the people going by there. That if we can beautify that corner a bit, it'll enhance the whole sense of, you know, people going by of what the neighborhood is. So I think it's a good location for a sign.
And I'll add that you can see it can be 50-50 with the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council and the community. I simply don't think there's a competition. In other words, I'm okay with however Beautification Partners wants to do the sign, as long as it's beautiful in the end. And that's, I think, the goal is not to send this off with some kind of demand, but rather just get it done and make it beautiful. Let it be flattering for the community, rather than turn this into a control issue.
Well, not only that, Jonathan, but I also would say that yes, it has to be flattering, and that's why you would not want to cheap out on it and have it look like a generic sign in Pocatello, Idaho. And it really should be,
What would you know
sorry,
about Idaho, Fred?
or Oklahoma, or anywhere else except Toluca Lake.
Now.
You know, this is being recorded. It's going to haunt me in the future. But you know what I'm saying is that it has to look like Toluca Lake, and it's got to be fancy and can't be generic and track housey. Anyway, go on, Tess.
Okay, thank you. I do notice that we have a member of the public with a question. So, Jonathan, I agree in principle and mainly with just about everything, although I'd love to see it in writing because it is rather long and I do want to go over it more carefully. You're mentioning two signs. When you and I have discussed this from time to time, were you not thinking about branding signs for all four of the communities within the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council area, the four communities within the district, Toluca Woods, Toluca Terrace? Toluca Lake already has their own signs, and West Toluca Lake, because what I'm hearing here is only West Toluca Lake, which is fine, but in terms of branding, I think a cohesiveness was what we were after, number one. Number two, when discussed with the board of the Residents Association, our thinking was that a sign welcoming people to West Toluca Lake would be better placed at Hortens right off of Vineland, just as sort of the gateway into the community, which is not to say that some sort of signage or something like it could not be and should not be put at that strip, because I agree that is a hugely problematic strip, and anything that we could put there would be a welcome change to what it is now, and all the schmutz, as you say, that is created. And last, with regard to Toluca Lake Beautification Partners, I would hope that we could find another entity to help with this. My disagreement with Beautification Partners has been, we haven't really gotten any financial reporting from them on any of the projects that have been funded that I have seen, including but not limited to the median, the Vineland median, which was funded almost a year and a half ago to the tune of $7,000 or $8,000. I don't believe a single blade of grass has been turned on that project, and that's in the western Toluca Lake area. So I would want to see more accountability for the projects that have already been funded before we start, handing more projects to them. I'm not completely opposed to it, but I'd like to see a lot more transparency than we've seen in the past. So those are my thoughts and questions.
Tess, really quick, and then let's let Ron speak. Are you
Sure.
talking about Hortense and Violin like in the median, or it could be like a double-sided? Where if you on Violin, you'd see
when this topic of signage of welcome to the neighborhood signage, or just sort of community branding signage, has been discussed at our board meetings for the resident association, and the most desirable location that we voted on was at Hortense off Vineland, at the Vineland
in the median,
not the center median, but the walkway median.
You got it.
And I will reconfirm that, at our next board meeting. So, we can, I'm sure we're negotiable, but that was the board's position on the best sort of welcome to the neighborhood position for a sign.
Okay.
What if I answer some of those questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Do you want Ron to talk first, or Jonathan, or do you want to?
Let me take care of Tess's because I won't remember. I'll forget. One second, Ron. Okay, I won't take long. First of all, on the money, let's talk money first. Money always goes first.
Money.
We're not allocating money.
Mm-hmm.
This is not an allocation of money to anyone. This is the money's already passed. This is a identification of a priority of how that money should already be spent. So I don't think we should invest it's fine to ask for transparency. One should ask for it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But whether or not it has nothing to do with the signs, because we're not allocating money in behalf of the signs. We're not increasing the cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
We're not doing anything. The second thing is on location of a sign. First of all, when we spoke initially, you and I, about the community sign in West Toluca Lake, that was before I'd even taken a look around the community to see where would a sensible community really brand itself. In other words, we were only talking about West Toluca Lake, but this is larger. This is about Greater Toluca Lake. In fact, it could say Greater Toluca Lake on the top line and West Toluca Lake on the bottom line, since it's identifying the part of town that is West Toluca Lake. You can still do one on the median turning from Vineland onto Hortense into West Toluca Lake. However, the down part of those signs as it went when I was there last is a sign of that nature doesn't get a lot of viewing. People are turning
a sign of what nature?
A sign at that location. It would be right in front of the power. There's a power line.
You're talking about the Hortense and Vineland, the walkway at that location.
That's right. Where there's a trash can right now. Remember, I said we got to move that trash can away from the corner. But in any case, it's not a highly visible sign right there. But there could be a hanging type sign that would. It's still feasible, but I think it pursues a different, like you said, it's a turning in point into the community, whereas the other sign is
more trafficked. I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, it's a very significant location.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So it's two different beasts, if you want to call it that, two different animals. One is a very, very local, and they're both worthy. But right now, I'm just dealing with these. I don't want it to be West Toluca Lake. I want it to be a community sign, and I want the people in this committee, because you're more familiar with the village area of Toluca Lake, to identify another spot. They don't have to be identical signs, but I think Fred is absolutely correct that investing in that sign on the corner of Vineland and Riverside Drive significantly, so that we simply don't have a spot like that. And most communities don't have that opportunity. So we've got an opportunity there.
It's very high traffic. And may I just add, I know that we have a member of the public who's had her hand up for some time, and in case that member of the public is unaware, the committee members usually make their comments and questions, and then we get to the member of the public, just so that nice member of the public doesn't get impatient with us. All right, thank you, Jonathan.
Can we go to the member of the public now? Do you want to?
I'm still waiting to ask Jonathan a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I
Ron-
would like to speak
Ron,
too.
Ron was before you, Bob.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
And then Rob.
All right. Okay, we discussed this at the chamber meeting a couple months ago. We have a second location. You know, you may feel it's irrelevant because it's the jurisdiction of the neighborhood council ends at Clyburn. But the logical place for another welcome sign is Riverside by the confluence with Alameda, right there. And there's a great space at the corner of Riverside and Evergreen. There's a big green space right there on the corner. It extends all the way into the front of the Gary Marshall Theater. I
Sorry,
know-
where is that again,
That's in
Ron?
Burbank, Ron. That's not in Toluca Lake anymore. You're in the Burbank side.
Hey,
Okay.
talking about, hold on.
I'm voting.
Beautification Partners includes all the way past Hollywood Way and way up north. So if we're going to talk about Beautification Partners, don't get all Toluca Lake proper on me. That's what I am saying, because as the people in West Toluca Lake get pissed off, rightly so, we get pissed off on the Burbank side. All right?
Ron, repeat the intersection, Alameda, confluence of Alameda.
No,
and what?
anyway, it's Riverside and Evergreen.
Riverside and Evergreen. Got it. Okay.
So that is the most logical place for a east sign for people coming westward into Toluca Lake.
I think that's a good place. All right.
Thank you, Ron.
That's it.
Okay, who's next? Bob.
Jonathan, have you broached this to the beautification partners at all, or is this something which we intend to do at tomorrow's meeting?
I wouldn't dream of going elsewhere other than this committee first.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I would say if we're gonna vote to put this on the agenda for the council meeting tomorrow, that somebody reach out, probably Colby, to Ryan Altoon, who chairs the beautification partners, to make sure he's there. He doesn't show up at our meetings anymore. So which is why Tess has some frustration. We can never ask anybody about the money that we did give them and the transparency and wherewithal is that money. So they've stopped making contact with the committee. So it's important that they hear this. And I hope, as I say, either the chairs of this committee or Colby reach out to Ryan or somebody from the beautification partners and make sure that they're there at tomorrow's meeting. Also, I would say.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Beautification Partners, and so is Robin, et cetera. There are a number of Toluca Lake people who are on it.
Yeah, but you can't speak.
I can bring this back to them. The problem you have is they're going to want something more formal than just a location and a general idea. I think so. And you specifically said, Jonathan, you don't want to allocate any GTLNC money to do the preliminary plan or schematic or some kind of drawing, some kind of description of what it is because it's a chicken egg problem, a lot of it. People start asking pretty quickly, how much is this going to cost? And you can't tell them unless you have a fairly good description of what it is you want. For example, do you want lighting or don't you want lighting? That's a huge difference in the cost. The kind of footings you have for it.
Ren, if I could speak right here, it might save some time. Once again, I'm not proposing that we send to Beautification Partners and CD2 because they're working together on that $2 million, not just Beautification Partners. I'm not proposing that we identify exactly what they're supposed to be doing by what you're saying, by giving all these details, but rather we're sending them a communication that this is our priority. Such a thing is our priority. And it's not, as I said, it's not the typical motion where you're identifying exactly what the end project is. Rather, because it's a very unique situation where the money's already existing and the project already exists and the participants already exist, we're just sending them the communication that this is what's important to us. Now, whether they do it or not is ultimately in their hands. We can't force anyone to do anything because we're not paying for it. And no, I'm not suggesting that we come up with money. There's $2 million. This is one of the problems I have with Los Angeles is there's money and it seems to not be spent on what the people want. Now, I'm not talking about the neighborhood council, but that's just the LA now. Is like, what about the people? So there's $2 million there. And this is getting a big bang for, let's say, $30,000 to $50,000, if even $100,000. $2 million is a lot of money to be working with. Even if you spent $100,000, it leaves plenty of money for other things that they may be planning. So it's for us to identify these two signs and locations as our priority. It will be for them to work with it.
You know what? Can I say something really quick? I like Friend's idea, because if we can ask the GTLNC for money for a design concept or a plan and then pitch that to beautification partners, that's probably better than if we're going to ask beautification partners for whatever money, then okay, you go design it, you take the idea. We should just present them something. And if we can get that money a little bit to just make our presentation from our committee, that may be worthwhile. The only other comment I have that I just, with our discussion is that if this $2 million is for CD2, will they allow us to spend that in Burbank? Is it, even though it's beautification partners, but the $2 million is for CD2? It could be a question.
I think we should take that one step at a time. And if we could get to Irene Birmingham,
Yes,
member
let's
of
get
the
to Irene.
public, and to preface it, I'm not quite sure what her comment is going to be, but quite serendipitously, she and I were discussing this very strip, Jonathan, that is the epicenter of your proposal. So I'm very curious to hear what Irene has to say about this. Irene, go ahead. Thanks for holding.
Well, thank you for allowing me to enter my comment. I would like to say, yes, I think that corner on Riverside and Vineland, what you're talking about is brilliant. I do understand that there is going to be a lovely, strong, sturdy iron fence that will be a good support and lead to a signage that would be on the corner. I was looking at your pictures and I like the one, I think it said Stonehenge, like towards the end where the sign was hanging on the metal with the anchoring of the river stones on either side. With the foliage combined with the other picture where the foliage is in the front to keep the vandals away from the sign, to keep the children away, from picking the letters off the sign. But the sign looks so sturdy. It looks like it's low maintenance, sturdy, secure, gives a sense of a richness to the area. I had a house in Valley Village, came over to West Toluca Lake. I have found that in this area, every couple blocks, there's a different name for your neighborhood. I like what the gentleman said about making it greater Toluca Lake and then putting West Toluca Lake under it. That was brilliant. And then just anchoring on that corner, people pay a lot of money to live in Toluca Lake, all across Toluca Lake. I like to write Toluca Lake on my address because I pay the money to live here. And when I say North Hollywood, people go, oh, North Hollywood. So I gotta like brush myself off, when I say North Hollywood. When you say Toluca Lake, they go, we don't know where that is. I say North Hollywood, they go, oh, it's a little bit better. But I like the idea of having an anchor for our community. I like it, and it does add value to the community. And that corner is just so wanting. It's so wanting for something. And for y'all to put this in here, I think I like it.
And-
Happily vote.
Well, and what's more, Jonathan, what I had discussed with Irene before I knew about your motion was there's grant funding, there's city beautification grant funding available for this type of thing. I had researched it preliminarily last year, but didn't get an application in on time. But that funding is still available. It sort of rolls over from, grant period to grant period. And I had mentioned this to Irene as something to look into for funding to get some sort of hardscaping or landscaping there. But this idea of yours is even better. I would add further, though, that even if we vote and pass this tonight, we can't agendize it for tomorrow because it has to be Brown Act compliant. There has to be at least 72 hours to notice something. However, I would be willing to meet about this in December, or we could have a special plum meeting and make sure that it's ready to go for our January general board meeting. If you like, that I think could be easily done if there's enough interest on the committee and availability.
I would answer what is lacking other than you said it hasn't, you'd like to read it. I can read it through again, but there's no information we're waiting for. And as far as grants go, I think that's the expertise of beautification partners at going out and shopping for money. So if there's a possibility that they can get even more money for doing this specific thing, I'm sure that they may be already aware of and have the wherewithal to do it. The idea is it's an existing project, meaning the spending of $2 million. Things are already going on around it. I think it's in our best interest to move quickly. You're correct. We can't do it tomorrow. When's the general meeting?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can't, clearly we can't. But is our next meeting of January before the general meeting
Yes.
Yes.
by more than 4 days?
It should be.
So,
It's always the Tuesday after our meetings. I mean, a week from the Tuesday after our.
So
Well,
we have
this-
time.
Yeah, this month is kind of weird because
It
our
got
plum,
weird.
our plum meeting, yeah.
Okay, so we can actually vote, then I can write this out and send it. Because there's nothing lost by doing this in January because it can't be done this month because of the Brown Act. So, but if everyone has a fairly good feeling about it, there's no information for me to bring to the table. I'm content with that location that I think it was Bob said. Was it Ron or Bob? Bob.
About what? I'm sorry.
Who suggested Riverside at Evergreen?
Bob. Sorry, Ron. Sorry,
That was Ron.
Ron.
Okay.
Ron,
if-
Ron, sorry, Ron.
Is everyone in this committee aware of that location? I'm not, but as long
Yes.
as everyone else, yep.
Yes.
I'm not. And actually, I wouldn't be comfortable voting that until we can find out if we can spend the money from CD2 with this 2 million.
Well, hold on about that. I do not believe that this $2 million grant went to CD2. I was at the event in which Nazarian, who is a state assemblyman, actually presented a facsimile check to the beautification partners, and nothing about CD2 that I remember. You were there, Ren. Do you remember?
I asked Steve Ferguson about it. The money went to beautification partners. I said, what are the parameters of it? And he said, community development, community improvement. There was no particular guidance because my goal in my conversation with him was what is the accountability factor on how this money is going to be spent? So he said CD2 would be involved in the oversight of the spending of it. Okay, but there are no constraints as to other than improvement on the community. And as I said to Tess, if there's more money they can access by additional grants, well, that's what Beautification Partners does.
Now, from what I understand, this motion does not specify a second location. I am saying, and if this is going to be headed basically by beautification partners, they were the recipients, as I understand it, of the $2 million, then the logical, best and most logical place for a second sign, and we've talked about this before, and I've talked to Ryan about this, is right there at the entrance to Toluca Lake on the east side. Before you get to Bob's, right there at the Gary Marshall Theater. And all of you in Toluca Lake proper are very proud of Gary Marshall Theater and Bob's Big Boy, and the car shows that go on there on Friday. So it's logical right there.
I think it's a good location.
Is that the same location you previously described as Riverside at Evergreen?
Yes.
Okay, got it. So it's pretty agreed then. Everybody, I'm comfortable.
Quick thing, Jonathan, would it, and listen, I'm not trying to knock the Evergreen location, but would it be simpler just to focus on one location per project, per proposal, instead of putting
What,
two?
are you proposing, are you saying amend the proposal? Because he did say 2 locations. And I'm saying, please let it, that doesn't have to be specified in this proposal or this particular motion, but the most logical place for a second sign is there, not at Clyburn. That
Yeah.
wouldn't make sense to me.
I agree with you. All I'm saying is that just to simplify it, wouldn't it be, and I'm asking Jonathan this question, wouldn't it be simple just to focus on one sign and one location and have that, treat the second sign as a second project instead of lumping them together?
My answer to that
I
is-
would agree. I would agree.
My answer to that is that I don't think it's a good idea to split it into 2 projects. Number one, that's 2 headaches. It's one piece of paperwork. It moves quickly. We're not defining every aspect of the sign. We're simply demonstrating, we're memorializing the priority that these 2 signs have for the community. It's not an order that they have to do it. You can see it's a request. It's not an order. We're not in a position to order anything, but I think having one sign I'm not comfortable with, and that's because there is a very rich history in the neighborhood council of disproportionate attention being paid different areas of the community. That's why I think it's important to have 2 signs, one in West Toluca Lake because the location is screaming for it, and another one someplace that soothes those people who can't cope with anything happening further than 1,000 miles from their house.
You've just proved my point. You've just proved my point why it should be separate, because there's a conflict with that, and it's gonna hurt you getting this first sign up. So the first sign, you already know the location you want. It's a concrete thing. The second one is so vague that I would not combine the 2.
I think we just decided, didn't we?
I think you're hurting yourself by doing that. And
No,
it'd be a lot easier just to have one sign per project and treat the second sign separately. That's
But
just,
the money's there now. Are you suggesting do it sometime in the future? Because the money's there. We're never
yes,
going to see the money.
I am suggesting that you do the focus on West Toluca Lake and only West Toluca Lake and get that done. And then the second thing, even concurrently, you could have a second location that we don't even know. Like we're even going back and forth, the second location. We've all agreed that the first location is golden and no question about that. I think that'll just make your life easier. That's all. That's my
It could be, Jonathan, it could be that if you jump in with just your proposal, it will have some traction, especially because it's pretty specific and I think it's almost a slam dunk in some sense.
No, I'm not. I'm going to resist.
If you have another one that's vague, then you have other communities who are going to come up with proposals and ideas, and they'll have your project wait while we look at, I don't know, 3 or 5 other potential ones and pick 1 more or 2 more, and there'll be are we going to have 2 or 3 or 5? I mean, if you get into
we're talking about, whenever I hear the word what ifs, what if we have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? We don't. Okay, there's 2 signs, and I'm actually pretty good at judging human behavior. I'm not perfect, but I know what I've heard over the last 2 years in the neighborhood council. And I see that beautification partner has zero experience at actually doing anything down in West Toluca Lake. The closest they ever got wasn't West Toluca Lake. It was a NPG they labeled West Toluca Lake, but it was on the south side of Riverside Drive. I think it's the areas that Tess wonders where the result is. That's really not the focus of this conversation. What I am trying to say is Beautification Partners has, the reality is they've demonstrated a fixation at working close to the village. The project itself isn't a West Toluca Lake project. I never thought of it like that. I think of it in terms of a Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council branding, just like Ms. Birmingham just said, is maybe we do want to put Greater Toluca Lake on the top, especially in that big intersection. Everything's negotiable. It's not a Jonathan control issue. Or should it be anyone here in the whole neighborhood council? We shouldn't be trying to control all the details about it, but simply identify our priority from the neighborhood council that there be 2 signs somewhere within the Greater Toluca Lake area. And we're saying in this case, you can't miss the Vine Lane Riverside opportunity. And now we've identified a second place, and that's the project. 2 signs. We're not telling them they have to spend more than money on one sign than the other sign. All of that has to be based on trust within the community, because if they screw it up, they screw up the community. And I don't think any of the entities we're talking about have a goal to screw up the community, because if they hurt West Toluca Lake, they just make the problems closer to them. So I think it's in everyone's best interest. I don't think anyone has the idea that we can afford not to do a good job throughout Greater Toluca Lake, because it insulates every inch of Greater Toluca Lake by having something nice everywhere.
Well, and I'd like to see some oversight. You use the word trust a lot, Jonathan. Trust is good, control is better, and maybe control isn't quite the word, but certainly oversight.
What's different about this project is that we're not funding it. So we have to be polite. You know, when I show up at the table with the money, my attitude is a lot different than when I show up at the table as a guest.
Well, but it's also
we're guests.
it's our community, Jonathan.
It is. But
so
I do
we
think
have some say.
I do think there is a word in a community for trust, and I've seen that there is a lot of peer pressure in Greater Toluca Lake, and that can be used good, and I've seen it used poorly in the past. This is an opportunity to use peer pressure, meaning there are people here who have good relationships with people at Beautification Partners. It would be on their shoulders to fully communicate the priorities of the community, that a good job is all that's expected. Like Rain said, lighting. Do we want lighting? I think in the pictures, I was going to say, notice the lighting. I think it's a great idea, you know, and you guys have actually brought it forward. I mean, I was skimping, thinking I'm dealing with people who don't want to do anything. And I agree with Fred. I think it's deserving of some money out of the $2 million. But again, I think there's no reason we have to bully our way into this. I think we just have to send a communication out, that a written communication, that these 2 signs are our priority, and it can be developed by trust, by conversations. We don't need to codify it all in a piece of paper, because I'll tell you right now, what we're working with is schmutz.
Okay, Jonathan, we're gonna move on, and this again, it's a better
Excuse me.
sell with one sign. We're going to get to you, Irene. Don't worry, I'm going to you next. But it's a easier sell with one. Just sleep on it, Jonathan. Go ahead, Irene.
When you said that you were interested in having a sign on the east side, I thought that was pretty clever, because I never know where Burbank or Toluca Lake begins and ends. And I have endless conversations with people. You know, is Bob's Big Boy in Toluca Lake, or is it in Burbank? Or I just would like to know where it begins and ends. And I think a signage there would be lovely. And plus, it is near an icon. It's near Big Boys, which is an icon in the area, and it just adds more to the community. I'm glad I'm on this call. I like the idea of what you're going for. And also maybe on Riverside and Vineland with that sign on the corner, could we have some kind of lights on the sign so at night it could be lit up too?
Yes, yes, lights on the sign. We're glad you're on the call too, Irene. You should join us more often. I hope, and maybe we'll see your video one day. And yes, I think 2 signs are great, but again, put them separate. Okay, what's next on the agenda? Are we done with this? Should we go on, or you want to talk more about this?
No, we're done. The agreement is then at the next meeting, we'll have a vote on a motion that'll be printed, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you circulate it to us, Fred or Jonathan or whoever? That would be great. Thank you.
Well done, Jonathan. Thank you very much. Very
And
excited.
I will say one last thing. We might as well throw in a couple more locations unless you think that's just throwing caution to the wind. Because, you know, at least from conversations we've had about this in the past, Jonathan, this was a district-wide sort of branding effort. So that suggests to me at least 4 signs, not 2, but that's just my thought.
Just tell, just before we leave it, what's the name of these 4 communities that you're thinking of?
Okay. Toluca Woods, Toluca Terrace, Toluca Lake, and West Toluca Lake. There's 4 communities in our 12,500 person neighborhood council
So
district.
which one is the village? What are they calling the village?
That's Toluca Lake. That's
Do we
also
want to
known.
call that Toluca Lake Village? Otherwise, it's just Toluca Lake. It doesn't stand out.
Yeah,
Like
it's the Toluca Lake Village, yes. First
Got it.
Well,
Okay.
but Jonathan, I mean, to be quite precise, Ren, the village is the little strip of stores along Riverside Drive, okay? That's
Yeah.
the Toluca Lake Village. And then Toluca Lake is, you know, the Bob Hope Estate, the lake itself, the homes, all right? So that's Toluca Lake proper. The village is simply referring to the shops along Riverside Drive.
Well, that's 5. So that Burbank sign should read Toluca Lake Village because you're entering the Toluca.
I
Lake.
mean, it could, I don't, but Toluca Lake Village is, you know, we're splitting hairs. It's not technically you know, Toluca Lake is actually a place on a map, whereas the Toluca Lake Village
Tess,
is not. But
From the
anyway.
branding point of view of marketing, what you normally do is, in this case, you don't want to use the word Toluca Lake for an entity of the greater Toluca Lake. What you would want to do is each one is called West Toluca Lake, one is called Toluca Woods, one is called Toluca Terrace, and one is called Toluca Lake Village. That makes each one verbally identifiable. Whereas if you just have Toluca Lake, then people will say, well, which part? So it gets confusing for people, and that's the beauty.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, so
you know.
I got, there are 4. So if the committee wouldn't mind, just at the next meeting in January, if we take a look at Toluca Woods and Toluca Terrace, if you've come up with locations, it would be interesting to put that down. So if you wouldn't,
Yes.
okay, and if you don't, then we'll stick to 2 signs. At least we have something to work with. Thank you.
What I like about what you just said there, Jonathan, is it really is Toluca Lake, and the boundaries are Clyburn, the river, Cahuenga, and Camarillo. That's Toluca Lake proper. If you were to put at the eastern sign that I hope goes in sometime, Toluca Lake Village, it is more generic, and it therefore incorporates those businesses there too. Bob's, the Marshall Theater, et cetera, that are part of Burbank, and you know, Mendocino Farms.
That's true.
Hanks,
Yeah.
Rainbows.
Or the
I
village.
think I really do like that. Welcome to Toluca Lake Villages. Very good.
Same here. That's why you should do it separate, you guys. I'm telling you. But Irene, also one other thing. North Hollywood is a good city. On my business cards, I have in apostrophe Hollywood. In Hollywood.
Oh, I don't see anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that that's the feedback that I get.
Well, I would never admit to people, and locally I live in North Hollywood, but outside the city, Hollywood looks really good because nobody knows. There you go.
Yeah, the
All
word
right.
Hollywood
Oh,
really. Yeah,
Fred,
it's cool.
you're a
I
Fred.
just
You're
had
a,
to throw it in there. I had to throw it in.
Fred.
Okay.
You're a, Fred. You're a snob.
So, hey, you know what?
Hey, it's
Okay.
Hollywood, baby.
That's right. So, and we really enjoy you being here,
But
Irene.
before we leave this, let me just ask you, if we do this separately like you propose, what does that mean? That I do this on 4 separate motions in January?
Honestly, here's what I think you should do. Just focus on the West Toluca Lake one only right now, and make that so good.
But
that
there's
you-
$2 million
I
present
know
right
that,
now.
I know that. Just hear me out. That you make it so good in the proposal that people are going to want to replicate that in other locations. But to bundle them together, you're going to run into a bunch of headache. Look at this meeting tonight. Nobody can agree on anything. And
We
if you-
did. We actually know,
I
we
know, I
just
mean-
figured out that 4 names, we have 2 locations.
We didn't, no one agreed on the second location. But what I'm saying is that your first location is a slam dunk. It's so easy. So just focus on that and run with that. And once that's such a success, and not far behind, you can add the second location. I just think it's going to make your life easier.
I
Honestly.
actually, Fred, I think that we go with 4 locations at once. And if there's too much back and, I see your point, but I think if there is too much back and forth, we can always take out, gut and amend and
Then
take
you've
the part.
wasted your time. The $2 million is spent. You got to strike while the iron's hot. I mean, I'm telling you.
Well, I don't think the $2 million is going to be, spent within the next 2 months,
or
hopefully.
allocated. I don't know. I think we're just making more problems for ourselves. the more that-
Anyway, well, you and Jonathan sort it out. I think
Yeah.
doing them.
How
all
about
at
if we
once-
leave it, Ren, if you wouldn't mind to talk to people there at Beautification Partners, since you know them, and let me know what you think to be the best route forward on 4 signs or 1 sign. How do they want to
Okay.
manage this? Okay. As I said,
Okay,
I'm
I
not
can do
willing to
that, yeah.
deviate from the reliance on trust in this. That this is very different than bringing money to the table, and it's an existing project, and it's just trying to prioritize something within it. Thanks.
I'd like to propose 87 signs, 1 sign per household.
You can pay for it. Give me your American Express card, no problem.
Tess, what about the homeless encampments? Should we not have a sign for each?
Yeah. This way.
Yeah.
All right, we're going
Well,
downhill
if
here.
we could make the homeless signs movable, then we could just, when the group gets big, we just take this away and say, okay, you guys, you're done. You're no longer a community. You've got to move.
All right,
God.
guys.
All right.
What's
What's the next
Get it back
item?
on track here.
Yeah.
Fred,
One-
you've lost control of the meeting.
Yeah. One other comment about the thing, when the council doing their fence, you need to be very careful that they don't suddenly bring it down to close to the sidewalk and put your sign on the other side of their fence. We need to keep an eye on what their plan is.
Well, no, Red, you got a good point, but that's why it's also great to have a backup location for this one plan, like Tess said in the Hortense and Riverside, or just in case Caltrans.
Well, I think it's a great location, but you really have to watch out. I've seen
Yeah, Ren, you know
suddenly,
what?
they're digging something up and putting a big sewer line or something right through where you wanted to build something.
You know what, Ren, that sounds like a Benny Hill sketch. They put the sign backwards or in the wrong place.
Yeah, it happens more often than you think.
I know.
Wow,
Anyway,
What's next?
the last project, I think we talked about,
Fred, Ms. Birmingham has her hand up, and then,
yes,
Oh,
Irene.
yeah, let me lower my hand and
thank you.
thank you.
Okay.
okay. The permit parking, 500 block, 5,000 block at Auckland and so forth. Fred, you've been talking to the lady. I think they're starting to get organized. Is that right?
Yes, she is, and we will have another talk with her, I guess, this week. She wants a letter of support from us to move forward. So what we were thinking is just saying that, we will work with a letter, like we'll work with her. Now, not necessarily a letter that the neighborhood council supports her at this moment, but that we will work with her to help her along in the process. And then at that point, she is going to get the feedback from, I guess, 6 blocks surrounding her house to find out if the other residents have enough support. And that's where we're at on there. We'll kind of hold her hand through the process. But also there are other options that we were going to propose to her, such as no overnight parking, or 2-hour only parking, or other things that would be easier than permit restricted parking that might be a good compromise.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's some other options that need to be explored. And I think initially our letter probably will be something fairly general, saying, we see that there is a parking problem in this specific neighborhood, and it's likely to be a more general problem, but we'd like the council office to focus on this neighborhood as almost like a test case. How can we deal with the increased parking, and how can the city assuage the needs of the residents and the needs of the business people and everybody else to have enough parking for everybody? So initially, I think the letter will have to be fairly general. If we come back and say, we support a parking district, I think we'll jump ahead of other options that might be better for them. So I think we want to, it's a step process. It's not, we have to go from this to that, and that's it. I think we need to approach this, and she has to get all, she and her neighbors to get enough support, and that's hard. Getting enough people to sign off on a petition to even have like an election for this is real hard. So. They've done it over on the west side, and they've done it in other neighborhoods. But my sense is those neighborhoods are A, probably better organized, and B, it took them a long time to get there. So, both are a hang up. Sometimes something good now is better than something much better 2 years or 3 years from now. So anyway, we'll talk to her. Yeah, we'll get together with her.
Okay. Oh, Jonathan, go ahead.
After that last meeting, I wrote to Tiffany and I copied you back, and then I wrote both you and Fred saying that Tiffany wanted to speak to that woman. You remember these emails I sent you?
Yes.
Okay, so Tiffany said she hadn't spoken to the lady, that the lady had spoken to someone else evidently at the council district office, but that Tiffany clearly wanted to speak with her. The question here is, did she talk to Tiffany?
Oh, and for the record, all of the communication with this woman has been through email, nothing over the phone. We don't have her phone number. So I could provide Tiffany with the lady's email.
Okay, well, after that touch, I sent Ren, and both you and Ren and Fred, what Tiffany had asked, because clearly what I had said to the person was correct, that before the neighborhood council is even involved, the council district wants to sit down with her, maybe by Zoom or whatever, and identify any mitigation steps that can be taken in advance. That's not something done in the neighborhood council, that's done with the councilman. So the question is always been, has she met with the council? Has she met with Tiffany? She needs to meet with Tiffany and clear up whatever mitigating steps have to go on. That's what I wrote within days of the last meeting, because it was really convoluted as to where she was at in the process.
Yeah, I think frankly, I didn't push that hard, because I think we need to talk to her first before she talks to Tiffany. She needs to clear up what area she's talking about, how much support she has, what the other options might be. I mean, she needs to walk in talking to Tiffany with a much better understanding of, what the history is of these kind of districts. There's a lot of background that she needs to have. Because I listened to her when she was talking, and she's got a lot of, the right ideas. But she needs to be prepared when she goes into Tiffany to know what to ask for and know what the likely possibilities are going to be. Because a lot of neighborhoods show up and they're demanding a parking district from the council office. And the council office can give them a laundry list. Okay, here's all the things you need to do before you get a parking distance. Up to our office with signed petitions from 50% of the neighbors. And then we'll take it up and we'll do it. And that rarely works. It's got to be a working relationship back and forth, figuring out what makes sense. And the council office has to really buy in at the end to a parking district. And they're a headache. I mean, you talk to the various council people, the staff, and they'll tell you they get constant problems with the parking district. People who parked there and gotten a ticket, and then they go to the council person and say, the signage wasn't right. What does this mean? How does this, why is, et cetera. It's an ongoing problem. And some neighborhoods handle it better than others, and the commercial people, that's the other element. The business people may well come to the council person and say, you can't do this. We pay a lot of taxes. We have our customers come. Our customers are voters in your district. And if you make it impossible for them to find a place to park so they can come to my business, I'll make sure they know you're the one, Mr. Councilman or Ms. Councilman, who did that to them. And, council people are pretty sensitive to that. So, we have to approach this, not jump right in. We need to come at it knowingly and purposefully. And it's going to take a year, at least, maybe more than that. But I'd rather have them get something than nothing. Because I think they need, I drove around the neighborhood and walked it a little bit. They do need something. They need some help. So it's up to us to help them in the right direction, not just simply sign off on a petition and keep moving. It's going to take more than that.
I'm just remembering that she felt my encouragement on adhering to the process. She felt that she used the word resistance, that I was offering her resistance. That's why I got in touch with Tiffany, is that I know she won't get anywhere if she doesn't, like you say, follow the process. So as long as you guys talk to her and kind of make her knowledgeable of that, number one, she has to talk to Tiffany before a letter of support can come from the neighborhood council. She clearly has to go through those steps on mitigating. And if you'll help her with that, then we're all set. But if she comes back to us and hasn't done that, she's not going to think we're very nice. She's going to misunderstand us as being resistant. Thanks.
Yeah. No. We have a very good relationship with her, and we'll take care of her. We will take care. We'll probably have more questions for you too, but she's in good hands. And on that note, anything else from anyone? No? Okay, well then I'm gonna go look at my Seas Candy Christmas catalog. My Christmas shopping. So I hope all you guys have been good little boys and girls this year. And you like,
is your committee gonna get gifts from you, Fred?
it's yet to be known. You'll see.
One
We
can
get
hope,
to
Ben.
pick 20 pounds, 50-pound box.
Well,
Are we meeting again next month? Are we planning another meeting?
No, that's a good, glad you brought that up again. There's no meeting in December, either of our committee or the GTLNC. And our next meeting is, what do we say?
it's January 7th, isn't it?
Unless
No, I'm sorry, January 9th.
It's the 9th.
Unless Ron, you feel there's an urgent need to meet.
No. I just wanted to be clear on that. That's all.
January 9th, 2026.
No, I do not like, I don't really look forward to 2.5 hours of arguing back and
Well, you know what? There's gonna be 6 more meetings of this until we're done. Think about that.
I enjoy it. I thought this was a great meeting tonight.
Yeah, we
did I.
mostly agree with you, Ron. Bob, you brought up the Gordian hedge, though. That's been my nightmare, the unresolved
That's frustrating.
yeah, the unresolved issue of our elected term. Oh my
Are you
goodness.
talking about Camarillo and Ledge?
Yeah.
I thought that had been cut down.
If it has, I'm unaware of it. Bob and I moved heaven and earth, and we could not get that hedge trimmed.
No, it hasn't been cut down,
It
Fred.
hasn't?
And the more egregious than the height of the wall is he's moved his property line 15 feet out to the edge of the road, which makes, if you're coming, I don't use Ledge anymore at that intersection because there's been accidents and I'm not going to be another accident. So if you come down Ledge and you want to cross Camarillo, you cannot see traffic coming from the east. You cannot see it. You have to push your car almost into the middle of the intersection, in which case you have an accident if there is a car coming. So we had lawyers involved in this. The heavy lifting was done by James Fitzpatrick. James Fitzpatrick. This is all done when Tess, I, and Jim were on the safety committee. We had you had a lawyer for a year, and the city refused to do anything, and they still refuse. This is a clear violation. You cannot take city property and attach it to your own property. You can't do it. It's a clear violation. And yet, even with that clear violation, the city refused to do anything, as they refused to do anything with 6-foot fences, 10-foot hedges, 15-foot hedges. They just don't do anything. So I know Tessa is a bulldog, and God bless her, but I realize the city is just hopeless. They just don't have any pride in themselves.
No, it is outrageous. Maybe one day we'll look at it again, Bob, when we've recovered.
That's very
I would
interesting.
hope so.
Let me just say this about that really quick, because I had a situation on my property about plants planted on the city side, and an inspector came out and told me that since there was a complaint about it, they had to close the case and remove all of the plants, and I was powerless to do anything about it. Right along my property line, but I had some shrubs on the alleyway that were not kosher, and my neighbors complained. And again, he told me, the inspector, that if there's a complaint with building and safety, they have to rectify it. And that includes, maybe this was my neighbor's property, but if some shrubs, let's call them ficus, are not planted 3 feet apart and they grow taller, that's grounds for a complaint. Somebody can complain about that, even on your property. You have to fix it if there's a complaint. So I wonder if it's worthwhile for you guys to file a new complaint with building safety about that.
Well, it was more of a Department of Transportation issue, because any roadway has what they call a parkway to either side of that road. Usually it's about 15 foot wider than the roadway itself. And that parkway is city property. It's there to prevent just what we're having here, is a dangerous situation where people view is obstructed. You can't see the traffic. So there are very clear rules in that parkway. You can plant shrubs, you can use it as your own property, making it very neat, but you can't build a permanent structure. In this case, this guy has built permanent structures, fences, concrete or brick pilasters. Hedges go between brick pilasters, and then a big gate for his driveway. He's built permanent structures in that highway, in that parkway, and yet we can't get the city to respond to it. The previous owner, because it was changed hands about 7 years ago, and the previous owner was very respectful. His property line, he had a little brick wall on his property line, and he maintained the parkway with some shrubbery and grass, and it looked very nice. When the new owner took over, he just took his fence all the way to the edge of the road.
Did you guys file a complaint with building safety?
We had a lawyer, Fred, on the case for a year. Nothing. The city refused. The city sent out engineers. They said it's not a danger. It's not a problem. What do you? I mean, they made you feel like you were the problem, not the owner.
That's too bad.
We'll pick it up again at some
Pick
point,
it up
Bob.
again. I would pick it up again. File no complaint. Squeaky
Yeah,
wheel.
well, I'm not on the public safety committee, but Tess is, right? Tess, you're still on?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay,
I'll pick it up again.
yeah,
I'll file the complaint.
it was a safety issue from our point of view. And
Mhm.
so that's the committee that took it.
Yeah, I've actually just been communicating with the general manager of building and safety. So yeah, we'll yeah, one thing at a time, Bob, but you've just revived my nightmare.
Yeah, well, somebody's going to get killed, and it's
Yeah, I mean
not really, it's serious.
it's just it's so incredible that the city doesn't enforce its own laws. Anyway, Jonathan, do you have a question? You've got your hand up. It's unlike
There.
you to be shy and not speak up.
Thank you.
All right. I think that's
Okay.
it, Fred.
All done?
Fred? Okay.
Okay,
Once,
44.
I wish
Well,
everyone
yeah.
a happy holiday.
going twice.
Yes, happy
Awesome.
holiday to everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Bye,
right, see you
guys.
next year. Bye.